Hello, and welcome to the Logistics Management Podcast Series. My name is Jeff Berman. I'm Group News Editor for Logistics Management Magazine and also the Peerless Media Supply Chain Group. Today, it's a real pleasure to welcome back Scooter Sayers to our podcast. Scooter is the Business Development Director, LTL Solutions at Cubiscan, a leader in freight dimensioning solutions. Scooter spends his days speaking with shippers, carriers, and 3PLs to deploy solutions that maximize revenues and profits, minimize cost, and optimize systems. Following a 25 plus year career at ABF Freight and ArcBest Corporation as a pricing analyst, progressing through several positions, including director, rating, and traffic services. In his latter role, he held responsibility for 100 employees in the corporate office, as well as the weighing and research team spread across the ABF Freight network. He also developed the LTL industry's first density-based tariff back in 1993. Scooter also spent 3 years in the 3PL and freight brokerage space with several companies. He then subsequently formed Sayers Logistics LLC, an LTL transportation consultancy, to deliver 3PL solutions by working with shippers, carriers, trade organizations, 3PLs, and technology providers to help move the LTL industry forward. Scooter graduated from the University of Arkansas with a Bachelor of Science in Industrial Engineering and a Master of Business Administration. He and his wife and his cat named Princeton currently reside in Northeast Georgia. Hey, Scooter, welcome back.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. Glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Scooter, we're near the end of the year here. Um, there's a few different ways we could kind of peel the onion on our conversation today, but I'll just kind of start at the top level, and that's kind of looking collectively at sort of the state of the freight economy. A while back, you told me in terms of the LTL market that there still was sort of an ongoing sense of freight recession malaise, if you will, and I'm wondering where things stand now.
Yeah, I think we're still kind of in that. I think everybody is tired and ready for it to end. We've all been kind of coached. If you've been in LTL long enough, you kind of get coached into the belief that we live in a cycle where, the market is up for about 2 years, it's down for about 2 years. And as we started getting towards 2 years in this down cycle, everyone just thought it was naturally going to start getting better, right? And so we were predicting we were going to come out of this cycle just because we felt it was the natural thing to do. But here it is. It's still ongoing. It's still prolonging. And I think we're just tired and ready for things to change. I think now as we head into 2026, I think there is some good, cautiously optimistic sentiments that things will get better maybe middle of next year. It's
Hmm.
not just wishful thinking. There's data points that we're now seeing that suggest that maybe there truly is going to be some recovery for us.
Okay, great, great. Um, so a big topic of 2025, or the main thesis or theme, if you will, obviously has been that of tariffs and trade policy. Um, how do you sort of view the ongoing, if you were to assess it now at this moment in time, in early December, how do you view the impact of tariffs and trade policy as it relates to the less than truckload market?
I think it was definitely disruptive when the changes to the tariffs hit. It just created a massive amount of uncertainty for everybody. Companies that were looking at making certain capital expenditures for equipment, for expanding facilities, for doing new things, they really pulled back and sat on their hands to wait and kind of see where the tariffs were going. I think everyone has kind of grown weary of it at this point and kind of taken
Yeah.
the position it is what it is. And I need to keep on moving forward as my company needs to move forward. So I think we're seeing some freeing up of that. I think we're going to start seeing, especially as we get into 2026, the a renewed desire to spend that money on capital expenditures. That's going to be very bullish for LTL. LTL is driven by the industrial sector, and I think as people start buying equipment, starting looking at expanding operations, investing in their companies, that's going to lead to more LTL freight moving, and I think that's going to be good for the LTL industry.
Okay, terrific. Um, so as a sort of follow-up to that, can you talk a bit, Scooter, about some of the key differences in the market between what happened during the pandemic, I guess early on in the pandemic more
Mhm.
specifically, compared to sort of the current uncertain market, in terms of how the sector had to adjust to certain shifts in trade policy and how that impacted planning. You just mentioned CapEx, stuff
Mhm.
like that. Those are things that require a
Mhm.
lot of thought, a lot of kind of taking the long road, if you will, which hasn't always, I guess, been available so much in 2025 at times.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's two things. Number one, the pandemic, I think, was truly unprecedented. Nobody was prepared for what happened with the pandemic.
Right.
You can argue that we weren't prepared for the tariff situation, but tariffs arise, disruptions like that arise, but it was nothing like with the pandemic. So I think that is the biggest factor is that nobody was prepared for the pandemic and no one knew how to react. And then the second part of it, the impact itself from the pandemic was much bigger. It was incredibly steep day one. We went from 60 miles an hour to 2 miles an hour immediately, right?
Yeah.
And with the tariffs, and the impact with them on LTL, it was more of like a speed bump than like a hitting the stop sign, so to speak. So the pandemic was definitely much more dramatic impact on LTL. And then the recovery, you think about the recovery, we really overcorrected from that in a sense, right? So the recovery was very steep, just like the downturn was with the pandemic. The
Yeah.
recovery just blew the lid off of everything. I think as we get to this next recovery, this next cycle, it's not going to be as pronounced. It'll be notable, but just not as pronounced as it was coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah. Well said. Absolutely. So let's shift gears over to the pricing environment on the LTL side. How are things currently shaping up as it relates to pricing, and what are sort of the key things that are top of mind as it relates to that shippers should be focusing on when we look at
Mhm.
rates and stuff like that?
The pricing is still pretty firm across the industry. I think there are definitely chinks in the armor here and there. You simply, not only do you have an ongoing downturn, which is tough on all the carriers, but a number of these carriers have just recently invested literally billions of dollars into their networks. So they've got to get freight into that network to support that, the massive investments that they've made.
Yeah,
And so they're scrambling to figure that out. They're scrambling to figure out how do I bring on more business without cutting price to get there. And it's hard to do. So I think pricing is still pretty firm, pretty good, but I do think that there is a growing desire for carriers to add new business at the right price. And in a sense, that can maybe look like a softening of price because maybe I'm willing to offer a better price for a customer's business than they're getting from their incumbents. And so I may be cutting the price, but for me, the carrier, it's beneficial for me to win that business at that price level. So I think
sure.
maybe we're seeing some softening in pricing just because some carriers are trying to gain a little market share or protect their turf.
Right. And does the fact that demand levels are not, they're not at like desired levels, obviously at this point, it seems. How do you sort of how do you sort of match that up with what's going on in pricing? Is it sort of there is a need for LTL operators to have full
Mm,
networks, obviously, to have that density. Um,
mm,
do they have to pay the price, pardon the pun,
mm.
when it comes to rates in order to get all the wheels moving?
Yeah, I think from the shipper standpoint, if it's a capacity issue, if capacity is tight, then I'm going to be less inclined to look for other providers, right? Because I don't know what they're going to charge me, and their business is doing better, and so now is just a better time for shippers to be looking at maybe possibly looking at other carriers for servicing their needs.
Okay. All right, that's great. And let's move over to service, Scooter. What's sort of the consensus on the current state of LTL service these days?
I think service is really good, especially considering that most carriers are down. It's really hard when your business is soft and declining to maintain high service because you just don't have the freight density to help support that. You're trying to figure out how can I cut costs to align with my the freight in my network, right? But just the closure of Yellow Freight itself a couple years ago raised the overall bar within the industry because that removed a carrier that was not known for great service. So
Hmm.
the overall service in the industry rose with Yellow's closure, and I think it really if the remaining carriers were not already thinking of this top of mind, it really made them see that for my long-term survival, for me to really grow and prosper, I have to offer excellent service. And so I think everyone is following that game plan that, providing excellent service is the way that I'm going to get that sustainable return on my business, that sustainable pricing level I need to keep on investing in my business and keeping that flywheel going and going faster and faster. No one is
Okay.
stepping in to fill the void of Yellow. So they're all stepping in to raise the bar and increase their service levels.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Now, this next question may have been more appropriate as a follow-up to when we were talking about the pandemic, but uh, how do you sort of view the impact of e-commerce on LTL market operations these days?
Well, I think it's bullish. I think that it's forcing, and it's not just e-commerce; it's everything involved in how supply chain works today because of e-commerce. You can't just, I mean, it's not just Amazon that's providing, next day or same day service. Everyone is gravitating towards more instant gratification of providing services. So every step forward to try to get items closer to the end customer, it just dovetails with what LTL does. It's moving smaller quantities closer to where they need to be. So it's long term, it's very, very bullish for LTL.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's certainly been a major freight driver, especially over the last 5+ years, to be fair.
Mhm.
Um, oh, here's a topic that I know you're very familiar with, and that has to do with the recent national motor freight classification changes that went into effect earlier this year.
Mhm.
What's your sort of take on that? How has it gone? Um, are there any friction points? What's sort of the roadmap on that front going forward too?
I think the only real friction points out there are the shippers that did not prepare properly and are still caught in, the 1980s or 90s way of doing things. I think the carriers, the 3PL community in particular, did a really nice job of getting shippers prepared. The NMFTA did an amazing job being as vocal and transparent and visible as they possibly could be in making everybody aware. I think that there was a lot of uncertainty about what was going to happen. I think that going into it, there were a lot of shippers that were still confused and had no idea what was happening or what I needed to do. But they were aware that they needed to do some things. And, it really just comes down to just trying to get a more accurate bill of lading into the hands of the carriers. And I think the shippers did a nice job preparing because the carriers, the 3PLs, the NMFTA helped guide them towards that. And so it wasn't as big of an issue as a lot of people thought. It's kind of like the Y2K. We thought
Sure.
Y2K, we're all going to die, right? Well, it came and passed, right? Why did it? Well, because no one knew exactly what needed to be done, but everyone collectively worked together to get the things done that needed to. And I think that's what happened here. There's still a lot of work to be done, Jeff. And I think the carriers, especially because of the soft market they're in, felt that they needed to protect their customers, protect their market share, and now is not the right time to get too disruptive with these changes. So they put in some protective measures, including more FAKs than we've had in the past to help
Hmm.
soften the blow. And so we'll see some of that, spread out over time, especially as the recovery hits. We'll see some of that protective measure like FAKs begin to unwind, and that impact that could have happened, 3 or 4 months ago, it just won't happen until next year or the year after for some people.
Okay. All right. Great. Great. Um, A few other topics I was interested in talking about here, Scooter. One was, and I think we've talked about this in the past, was the concept of LTL M&A, or mergers and acquisition
Mhm.
activity. How do you sort of view what's going on that front? I can't help but think back to Knight and a few years back when they kind of expanded into the LTL market through acquisition with AAA Cooper, and then
Mhm.
subsequently, I believe it was Dependable. That's just one example, but and obviously, uh, the other large players have left the market subsequently too, and I guess that or not leave, but UPS Freight got acquired by TFI a while back. Those are sort of two big examples of LTL M&A at the top of my mind,
Mhm.
but not to just recite or name deals. I mean, what do you think about it as sort of a concept, a strategy, etc. Within the market for LTL players?
No, I think that with the mergers that we saw the last couple of decades with Yellow Freight and Roadway and
Yep.
USF, it kind of showed everybody that, taking two similar carriers with maybe two similar footprints and trying to put them together, um, the output is not equal to the input, right? You don't end up with a carrier that's twice as big, yet twice as formidable by doing that.
Hmm.
You just don't gain much benefit from that. Your terminals don't instantly grow twice as big. Now I've got twice as many terminals. How do I pump that much freight through double the number of terminals? So, to me, in the LTL space, the M&A really only makes good sense in that regional type structure where
Yeah.
I'm in this region, but I need to be in that region. That's the way to go get there. Do I build, or do I grow organically and go, find terminals, which is getting harder and harder to do, or do I go buy somebody who is in the space I'm in? So I think that's what we're going to see more in 2026 and beyond is maybe M&A and from that regional standpoint, but we're just not going to see nationals joining forces, except maybe in one case I can see where maybe it makes sense, but for most
Yeah.
nationals, it just really doesn't make sense to do that.
Understood. Yeah. So perhaps more of a tuck-in
Mhm.
approach, if you
Yep.
will.
Yep.
All
Mhm.
right, great. Another thing I forgot to I wanted to ask about was just the it's technology, and specifically AI, and if and where how you see it impacting LTL. Where could it be seen as a I guess another tool in the toolbox, or ways in which the LTL sector can leverage it? What are you seeing? It seems like in my from personally speaking, every third email I get these days is an AI related press release. Beyond
Yeah.
prevalent.
Yeah, it's funny that the conferences I go to, the speakers, they either want to talk about AI or they feel like they have to mention AI because they're speaking
Yep.
at a conference, right? So you almost have to bring it up. But I think just like in any other industry, I think it's gonna, if it's deployed in the right way, it's going to be helpful. To deploy it to help empower the people that you have to make them better. Um, I get excited about AI in the sense of how it can be used internally. Even in the small company I work for, we've got this massive amount of tribal knowledge that certain people have. How do you spread that information out? Every big trucking company is like that too. Every big 3PL is like that. How do I get this collective knowledge across my industry, across my company, into the hands of anybody who has a question about it? And I think that's one of the really cool things that we can see with AI. Just like when I go to Chat GPT to go figure out, I'm going on vacation somewhere. Where do we go eat dinner? Or
Yeah.
I want to build a deck. How do I do it? In my company, I have questions about, how does this system work? How many widgets can we add to this device? And I don't know. So I wish I could do like a Chat GPT that looked inside my company and pulled in the answers to make me better at what I do rather than spending 2 days trying to find the person who has that knowledge. So that's one of the cool things I think I see for not just the LTL industry, but any company in general. And just, anything that can shave off the friction with customers and make the employees better at serving their customers, it's going to be good. And AI's got the capability of doing that.
Oh, absolutely. Um, and I hear you on ways to leverage Chat GPT as well.
Mhm.
It definitely is a very helpful tool.
Yeah.
Couple more quick ones here, Scooter. One I forgot to ask earlier, and that simply was the 2025 peak season. Kind of different, just in the sense of how there was a lot of front loading or pulling forward of U.S. bound imports earlier in the year to get out in front of tariffs. Um, it led to a kind of an earlier peak,
Mhm.
by and large, really for different modes too. And I'm wondering how the LTL 2020, I can't talk. I'm sorry. The 2025 the 2025 LTL peak, how things shook out. How did you see it?
I think it shook out just like what you said. I think that maybe people thought maybe LTL was recovering a little bit better when they were looking at tonnage levels, shipment counts in June, July. Everyone across the board has been reporting a softer October than expected, and they're looking at November, and it's got I think like 18 working days. So they
Yeah.
were not, no one was excited about what they saw in October. No one was excited about what they were projecting for November either. And I think that's part of it, was that a lot of that inventory was pulled forward. So there just wasn't as much freight to move, during the October period, which,
Yeah.
October is what drives the fourth quarter, just like March is what drives the first quarter. And October was just not a great month for most of the carriers. And they weren't seeing any rosy signs with November and December either, largely due to that pull forward.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely had an impact on volumes and inventory positioning and stuff like that. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Um, so Scooter, just to wrap up, and I know we touched on a bit of this before, but as we wrap up this year and head into 2026, what are some of the sort of key LTL based trends, themes, and indicators that you're going to be monitoring as we head into the new year? I know you talked a bit about capacity and hopefully an industrial economy slash manufacturing recovery. What are some things that you're going to be keeping a close eye on? And as a quick follow up, what are some things that shippers should be focusing on into
Mhm.
2026?
Uh, you know, Circling back to AI for a minute, one of the things that really impresses me, like with Chat GPT, I'll tell you, kind of calling myself out here. Funny story about me and my wife. She's really good about pushing me at my limits to, working on household projects.
Sure.
So she was after a project to put in some windows in our porch. I didn't want to do it. So what did she do? She starts asking Chat GPT how to do it.
Right.
And she commented to me that Chat GPT told me everything that you weren't willing to tell me, and he was so much nicer than you are. And she referred to Chat GPT as a he and was talking about how nice he was. Um, and I recall talking with a big 3PL that's been done a lot with AI recently, and they told me how, like, first generation, it would make these calls to carriers searching for the PRO number, and how they realized, step one, we got to talk like a person. We can't call it a PRO number. It's a pro number. So
Yeah.
the more
Yeah.
that Chat GPT or any AI can act like a human and sense feelings, convey feelings, um, be faster than, when I call a company and I've got to listen to the phone tree of dial one for accounting, dial two for HR. It takes me 20 minutes just to find the person I need. The better that AI can get at serving people by just quickly picking up and understanding who you are and what you need, I think that's where AI is really going to help and dominate, especially in LTL. And, beyond that, I think that some of the things I'm looking at is just as we see this recovery, which hopefully will finally come in 2026,
Yes.
I'm really interested in seeing how each carrier handles that growth in business, that influx in business. Again, we've had some carriers do some massive investments in their companies, so I'm really excited to see how those investments pay off and how well these newly built networks are at handling a higher level of freight. So that's one thing I'm looking at. I'm also looking at how pricing continues to evolve. And it's not just the NMFC, which is going to continue evolving, but every carrier out there really would prefer to move away from the NMFC and price on their own, kind of like
Hmm.
how you and I buy airline tickets.
Right.
They really want to get to a model like that where you bring the carrier a shipment, they give you a price for it without having to use some complicated model with a base rate and a discount and a class. They just want to tell me how big it is, how much it weighs, and where it's going. I'll give you a price for it. So we're going to see that evolution continue to take place. And as the freight market recovers, the carriers are going to be in a better position to roll out programs like that. So that's what I'm looking for. And then probably the last thing I'm looking at is, are we going to see any big disruptive force come in LTL to try to change things? And what I mean by that is everyone used Blockbuster before Netflix came around. Netflix almost died. They even tried to get Blockbuster to buy them, and now look what we are today, right? We all thought back in the days of Blockbuster that that's how you watch movies. You went to the store and you
Yeah.
got a movie, right? So, is there something coming in LTL that could disrupt it a little bit? Maybe not, harm the carriers too badly, but is it just another option for shippers to use that's a little bit different than how LTL is done today?
Yeah.
There's certainly profit to be made. The carriers make good money. So that's just another thing I'm going to be looking at. Is it going to be Amazon doing something? Is it, some other entity like that maybe going to dip their toes into the LTL market? That'll be interesting to see.
No, absolutely. And that's a great place to end up, Scooter. On behalf of Logistics Management Magazine and the Peerless Media Supply Chain Group, I'd like to say thanks for coming back and spending some time with us today.
Yeah, great. Always fun to sit back and chat with a real pro like you, Jeff.
Hey, likewise, right back at you, Scooter. Appreciate it. And for those of you listening in here, I encourage you to please check out the Cubiscan website, simply cubicscan.com, and also Scooter's consultancy, Sayers Logistics, sayerslogistics.com. And Scooter also maintains a solid presence on LinkedIn. So please go ahead and check him out there. If you want to connect, just look for Scooter Sayers. It should come right up. And also, please give us a follow on Twitter at LogisticsMGMT. And if you're not already signed up for the Logistics Management Podcast, please go ahead and do so wherever you get your podcasts. Really easy. The Logistics Management Podcast, it will pop right up. Thanks, everybody, and have a good day. And we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Scooter.